Good afternoon, everyone. It is Tuesday at the dot of noon, October 5th, and welcome to the table. I see we are already a feisty bunch of folks who are commenting and logged in, and I know it's because of my fabulous guest who is right here. You're all dying to see and hear, and I'm super, super excited. Before I make our introductions, I will do a little bit of housekeeping. So we are projecting, I guess, live on LinkedIn through StreamYard. And just so that all of you know, we can see your comments coming into the thread. So please comment, ask any questions you have, and Kate and I will do our best to respond to them. I like to bring the questions onto the screen as often as I can. I can't necessarily respond to them in text because I'm trying to manage the show itself. So anything you want to ask us, go ahead and put it in the chat and we will answer live in the session. And for anyone who is not able to see the show live today, I do save the recording and I post it to my YouTube channel, which is The Business of HR. So I will share that with you guys as well real quickly. So if you want to jot that down, just know you can watch any previous sessions of the table on my YouTube channel at any time and share them with your team or coworkers or whomever if you'd like to do that. Okay, so all of that being said, please join me in welcoming Kate Bischoff to the table today. Whoop, whoop. We're so excited. Kate is an employment attorney and human resources consultant. And let me share with you Kate's website. Kate focuses on culture, helping folks with handbooks, investigations, training, all things in the HR space. However, and all that's great, but Kate's joining us today because a couple of weeks ago, I was appalled, frankly, when SHRM announced that they were, hiring Gretchen Carlson to deliver the closing keynote speech for the Inclusion Summit, which is happening this month, October of 2021. And from my experience of Gretchen, while I didn't watch her on Fox News, I was very aware of her. And my understanding of her experience is that she was a victim of sexual harassment, and there was a movie made, Bombshell, which is loosely based on her experience. And I think that if there was a conference on sexual harassment in the workplace, she might be an appropriate speaker for that. That being said, she has also been very vocal for years around her lack of support for the LGBTQ plus community. She's made some very derogatory comments, very condescending comments publicly, both in Twitter and vocally on the air. And I just couldn't wrap my head around why they would select someone who is pretty much the epitome of inclusion to deliver a keynote at an inclusion summit. So then I was inspired to write a letter to the board, which I shared openly with our LinkedIn friends and family. And I emailed it directly to every board member, as well as through direct messages on LinkedIn to the board members I could connect with. Sadly, I have not received any response to any of the outreach I have made. And a dear friend and colleague, Tracy Sponenberg, recommended that I reach out to Kate, who many of you are already familiar with as a result of the work she's been doing and a petition that she launched. So that's a little bit of backstory on what got us here today. So Kate, welcome and thank you for giving us this time and your expertise. Excuse me.
Barbie, thank you so much for having me here. I am not in the business of trashing organizations in one way or the other. However, your experience of noticing the Gretchen Carlson contract is one of a pattern of conduct that SHRM has undergone over the past at least 18 months that I've seen as at one time a special council member. I've been very active in SHRM. I have, blogged on their behalf. I've been contributor for various things. And I am a big fan of the HR industry as a whole. However, I have come to the realization that SHRM is taking a very quote unquote old school approach to human resources and is not where the bulk of us are in seeing where we should be in human resources. As my very good friend Christina Minyard says, you can't be in HR if you don't believe in human rights. And a bunch of the action that SHRM has taken have just shown a disregard for those kinds of rights. And I've got a list for you. Are you ready?
I love it. Yes.
Okay. So this is Minneapolis. Welcome to South Minneapolis, where I live. This is standard architecture. You'll find it in nearly every home. But I live in Minneapolis. The events of late May of 2020 show that Minneapolis is broken. The world is broken. And as a result of the murder of George Floyd, I was looking to SHRM in particular to say the words Black Lives Matter, to want to support the HR folks who were struggling at that point in time, to push organizations to be more upfront about that, to say, we believe in this, knowing that the pressure was going to come down on them or was already coming down on them to improve things like diversity and inclusion and belonging. And because of all of those things, I was looking to SHRM to do something. Well, lo and behold, nothing happened. At one point, there was a communications director, a professional at SHRM in communications, a Black woman. She miraculously disappeared from their leadership. And I'm like, why did that happen? She has not spoken openly. I think she got a severance package is my suspicion. I don't know that for a fact. However, I suspect something like that happened. And so SHRM wasn't saying Black Lives Matter when organizations that are much more and I'm sorry, this very loose use of the word conservative, but conservative in their business focus were already leaps ahead above SHRM. Like they were way out front saying, we believe Black Lives Matter. Here's the actions we're going to be taking. SHRM was just sitting back doing nothing. And my experience with SHRM and the LGBTQ plus community was equally as abhorrent. I have a friend who had gone to a SHRM conference and she was misgendered while at the conference. And I'm like, these are HR people. This is not what should happen at an HR conference. And so I refused to let this go unsettled. And so I had done some research. I talked to some people on Twitter. One person had contacted me and showed me a press release from 2015 in which SHRM had said, we believe that LGBTQ plus status is in Title VII, which, the Bostock decision we get in the end of June of 2020, saying that LGBTQ plus is protected by Title VII. Well, SHRM may have held that position several years ago, but they did not file an amicus brief on behalf of HR to the Supreme Court for the Bostock decision. They stepped back. They were going to remain silent and mum on the topic. I'm like, we should be saying, we think this is, and here's how we want to help our communities, and here's how we want to help our organizations. But nope, we're going to remain silent on that, okay? The next was, because we were in the midst of COVID, there was a huge push from SHRM well before we had a vaccine that everyone had to come back to the office. Now, I don't know how well you know what SHRM does and what the SHRM professionals do, but there is no reason for SHRM employees to have to be in an office, especially when they have employees with kids who are immunocompromised. They may be living with parents who are immunocompromised. And there was a complaint filed with OSHA on this very topic. And if you look for, there's an article about the Scalia guy who was the Secretary of Labor at the New Yorker. And in that New Yorker article, it talks about a woman who had filed the OSHA complaint and then SHRM stepping in and OSHA saying, do you really want to file this complaint for this? So it was all of these things, like they're forcing people coming back into a workplace where their work doesn't require them to be there and it's unsafe for them to be there. They don't feel safe, on top of the hundreds of cuts that SHRM has gone through. The events team no longer exists. Marketing is no longer exists. If you're on team Johnny C. Taylor, you might have a job. If you've ever questioned him, you don't have that job. That's my understanding based upon both current and former employees. That is their perspective. Then probably another one that really, really irks me, because I am an employment attorney. And so I'm a super nerdy person, right?
I love that.
There is a Ninth Circuit Court of Opinion, a Court of Appeals opinion that held that the use of someone's prior salary history is not a reasonable basis to include into determining someone's new wages. Okay. So you can't use someone's salary history to determine what their new wages are,
right?
Because that's not a factor, not based on sex. Okay. And so Ninth Circuit says you can't use that. It's unlawful in several jurisdictions and states already. But the organization in that suit appeals to the U.S. Supreme Court. And guess where SHRM comes out?
At all? Did they say anything? I don't know.
Yeah, they did. They filed an amicus brief saying that HR should be able to use someone's pay history to determine what their future pay is. Okay. So we've known, those of us who've worked in pay equity, those of us who are trying to build transparency into pay overall, know that if you're using salary history, you may be just perpetuating the wage gap. And so for a professional organization to argue that we should be able to do something, which is unlawful in several jurisdictions,
right,
because they want to maintain the status quo, is not where we should be as HR. I think it is a poor representation of those of us who are trying to bring human resources into the next century, into this century.
Into this one, right? Even years ago, right? Let's just put it somewhere.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
So it is something that is just irks me so much. So then we get to Gretchen Carlson and Drew Brees. Now, if you remember, Drew Brees was a keynote speaker at SHRM as well, just a couple weeks after he filmed an ad for an organization that actively argues against the inclusion of the LGBTQ plus community. So he films an ad in support of them, and then he is a keynote speaker for SHRM. So you've got these matching of Gretchen Carlson and Drew Brees representing SHRM, being the people there to represent SHRM to speak to HR. Now, the part I want to mention just a little bit about my perception of Gretchen Carlson. Okay. Gretchen Carlson is a former Miss Minnesota and Miss USA. Okay. So she comes from my neck of the woods here in Minnesota. If you have been on or watched Fox and Friends when she was an anchor, the comments and the conduct that show held and continues to hold to this day do not necessarily align with efforts to build diversity and inclusion into any workplace.
Yeah.
It is not okay for her to be sexually harassed in any way, shape, or form. I appreciate her efforts to remove things like non-disclosure agreements and arbitration agreements. I commend her on that. But there is not a position that she can take where that is the only reason she's speaking. It is her whole body of work that needs to be examined,
right,
to say she should be an expert on inclusion. And that's where it was, I will say, Barbie, didn't come as a surprise that she's the pick, right? No.
Yeah. Well, no, I was shocked, but I frankly, I self-admittedly, I've dipped in and out of SHRM throughout my career. I was never, one of the gung-ho, like every year signed up, registered, had my card and all that kind of stuff. I would be in and out. If there was an event I wanted to go to, I would, be a member for that year, and then I'd let it lapse and kind of go back and forth. And I got my SPHR and did all that stuff because at the time it felt like I needed those credentials for career progression. Right. But the
100%
more I
agree.
got involved, the less relevant they became. And the last SHRM conference I went to was in Chicago a few years ago. And I swore at that, I was like, I am never doing this again. It was overcrowded. The content was just so vanilla and empty. And aside from getting to network with some really cool people in the bookstore area and kind of the non-session kind of things, I was like, I'm not doing this. The anxiety I have just being around all of this is just way more than it's worth to me. So I was oblivious to a lot of the things that you're so, well versed in. And then when this came up, I'm like, I can't just sit silently. I have to do something. But I just feel like it's so important that we help people understand kind of the arc of what we're seeing. And this is a pattern of silence when they should be using their voices louder than anyone, right? And I know they proclaim they're about policy, not politics, but I don't know how you separate those two things. I mean,
no,
politics is based on policy, and policy is written based on political agendas and views. So the statement in and of itself is a contradictory quagmire of nothing, right? It's just an excuse that they sit behind that I just don't understand.
Yeah. So I am with you 100% there. I can't look at their stated position of policy, not politics, and not say, but politics is people, and that's what we do. Right. Like that's like literally what we do is we handle the people and we write policies to help set expectations and set the culture for the organization. And so if we're not talking about the politics around these different things, we're leaving out a big aspect of the people we serve, which are employees and management. And so this idea that it's policy, not politics, we have to step in. Several years ago, there was a SHRM legislative conference, and they would put a Democratic elected official and a Republican elected official, and they would talk about something where they might not necessarily agree, but that there was room for discussion. And there are things that SHRM has supported in the past, like education reimbursement, where we need legislation to change with some of the thresholds about education reimbursements so that employers get a tax advantage and we get to give this gift essentially to employees, which would help everybody. And so this was a high profile issue that you could have had Senator Mark Warner and whoever you wanted on the Republican side to talk about. Did they do that? No, they invited Ivanka Trump to speak instead as a surprise guest. Okay, so there are opportunities for us to have meaningful discussions around the policies that we need help with, but SHRM shies away from it in exchange for the ego of Johnny C. Taylor, in my opinion. And that's only exacerbated by other conduct that Johnny engages in, like naming a book, fire half your staff, and using SHRM to promote it, or using his renamed title of his book, Reset, to use it, or taking a board position at an HR tech company, which is a clear conflict of interest. Just clear conflict of interest. It is just his benefit to him, not necessarily a benefit to SHRM as a whole. And in fact, might take exhibitors and say, well, if you're going to be on the board of ISIMS, me, ATS, I'm not paying thousands and thousands of dollars to be an exhibitor because you've shown that you're going to support ISIMS over me in the first place. So it's those kinds of ego-driven decisions that they've made.
So do you think, and this is purely speculation on my behalf because I am truly learning all of this as we go, it seems as though Johnny C. Taylor is positioning himself for a political position, right? For whatever, Congress, Senate, who knows, governor, I don't know what his aspirations are, but the moves he's making, the people he's choosing to give a platform to, the people he's choosing in this circle certainly seem to be people who have influence in the political world that would then allow him to kind of use this as a jumping off point. Is that like, am I crazy in seeing this?
No, you're not. No, I don't think you're crazy. I think most of my friends who I talk to about this regularly believe that's the case, that he's going to run for office someday and is going to use all of this relationship building that he's used by using SHRM to build these relationships as his method to do that. I think it totally was that. And so I think that you're right. You may be right. I don't know if that's for sure what he's doing, but it certainly seems to be very calculated in that kind of direction. So,
well, it does.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
What I was going to say is, it seems that to me, and what is, I think, even more, again, I'll use the word appalling, because that's truly how I felt after George Floyd was murdered. And he was murdered, right? It wasn't a sad event. It wasn't a circumstance. It wasn't an event. It was a murder. That and I don't know if Johnny identifies as a Black man or not. But I believe he is a member of the Black community, or at least he is a person of color, that he himself did not come out with some statement in support of George Floyd and Black Lives Matter and the horrendous events that happen and continue to happen in this country. And he has this platform, and yet he's not using it in any way that is controversial or puts himself out there in a way that could be perceived as damaging to a brand. And yet I think it's very damaging to his brand, because he seems like he just doesn't care.
Well, I agree with you. My position on this is, when you're a leader, you have to lead. You can't just sit back and let the train go down the road it's been going down, especially when external events are forcing you to take a position, because doing nothing is absolutely taking a position here. At least it is for me. I am looking to you, SHRM, to make decisions or show that you want to support my work and what HR should be overall, not necessarily, getting to check every one of my boxes, but showing that this is a people-centric part of our business world, our organizational world, and that we have to put people first. And so ignoring the events of George Floyd's murder, I mean, he may have had Ben Crump and Mr. Floyd's brother on stage at one point, but that was a show, right? That wasn't necessarily this is going to be our position. And I think Mara I hope I'm saying your name right, Mara, but silence is complicity. The lack of saying something does make a difference. And the piece that SHRM really does drive me insane is that I've been a volunteer for them. There have been lots of long-term volunteers here who are very upset, legitimately upset about their voice not being heard, not being listened to, and not even being acknowledged in many ways. And that's the part that is like, you are here to serve us. I was a member so that you could help me, not just that I could help your bottom dollar. And I think a lot of the analysis of whether Johnny C. Taylor is good for SHRM, coming from people like Tim Sackett, is that SHRM is making money. We shouldn't complain about it.
Right.
And no,
no,
not the analysis. That's 1960s organizational development. That is not where human resources is today.
Well, and in the letter I wrote, one of the points I was trying to make was that if you're here as this organization representing the people space, not only are you expected to be the voice and advocate for the people, the employee, but also the practitioners who are giving you our hard-earned dollars to be our voice. And we are a diverse population, right? We have members of every community, of every race, of every faith, of every any variable that's out there. HR people ourselves are members of those communities and deserve representation and support. So not only are we not getting really strong guidance and resources from them to help within our organizations, but as individuals, we don't feel seen, heard, valued, understood, and supported by an organization that exists solely for the purpose of supporting the work we do. And that's what it's like mind-boggling to me. And, there's been so many comments coming through. Thank you guys. One of the comments is, then why do we continue to put on job postings that we want these credentials, these SHRM credentials? And I think, it's a mindset shift that we have to have. We need to be having conversations with our CEOs, with our COOs, with our internal stakeholders to say, like, that was the past. Those credentials, it doesn't mean that they don't have some value, but that should not be the sole differentiator for someone to be a director or a VP if they have the SPHR or the SHRM CP or whatever the credential might be. That it's a nice to have thing if they chose to go down that path, but let's not hang our hat on that being something that's going to set that person apart, because maybe they didn't have the money to spend, and maybe their company didn't support it for any number of reasons. Really great people in HR may not have those credentials. So I think we have to take a really strong position in removing that requirement from job postings within the HR community.
Yes, because it's lazy. The reason why it's there is it's lazy. I'm sorry to everyone who thinks that is really important, but it really is lazy. I mean, every time someone asks me, how do I do well on the SHRM SCP? I say, answer the way SHRM was, not actually how you would.
Oh, yes.
You wouldn't actually handle the situation this particular way. My favorite is like using the burrito technique for an employee, for a manager who's got bad people skills. Like, they're really good at sales, but they got bad people skills. Remember, you tell them that they're really good at sales, but now we have to work on the people skills. Like, no. We don't use the burrito method.
Bad news sandwich approach.
No, exactly. No, we're going in, we're saying we got to work on this. We got to be direct, but that's not the way SHRM wants you to answer it. SHRM wants you to, trade favors. That comes directly from their leadership module, from training for the SCP. Like, it's directly there. They want you to trade favors. That's not how HR works. We are ethical. We are going to do what's right for the people in the organization. We're not going to be out there trading favors. We're going to be trying to do our best to represent the organization to employees and represent employees to the organization. So
Yep.
It frustrates me to no end about this. So sorry.
Oh, yeah.
I get a little worked up.
Yeah, well, as we should all get a lot worked up, because this organization is very profitable, I have no doubt. And what are they really, what support, guidance, tools, and resources are they really providing for people? If I look at, and I'm sure you get the questions. I know I get the questions. I know Tracy Sponenberg gets these emails from people and DMs. I'm trying to get into HR. I'm new to HR. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I don't know how to do any of this. Can you help me? What are the resources out there? I can't say go to SHRM, because that's not going to help them at all.
Go to Lars. I would say just go to Lars Schmidt these days. So that's where I'm going to send everybody, is to go to Lars. But
it's just sad, because what they talk about is and this is what I say all the time, is if you go to a SHRM conference, and we're talking at the national level, I do also want to say, as a caveat, the local chapters and even the state chapters, I think, are head and shoulders above the national, larger, umbrella company. And we have a lot of dedicated and heart-led people involved in the local and state chapters. And so I don't want anybody to think that we're here, bashing those very, very hardworking volunteers who are doing it because they really do want to make a difference. But now I lost my train of thought. So I think when I would go to the big conferences, I would sit there in disbelief often, because you get so energized and so excited about whatever the keynote is or the breakout sessions. Oh, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that. And then you get back to your desk on Monday and you're like, what the hell? I don't even know where to start, because they hire people and they bring in speakers often who talk about the what. They talk about, here's your problem. Buy this book, buy this system, buy this tool, and here's the result you're going to get. But nobody tells you how to get from A to Z. The how is missing from all of it. It's just buy this and this is going to solve your problem. And we all know that that is not reality. It is simply not. You're going to layer a great tool over a bad problem. A book is not always going to solve everything. Books are great. Love them. Read them all the time. But a book in and of itself is not going to solve your problem. You have to know how to do things. And that's where
or how to critically evaluate that book, right? Like I use Kim Scott's Radical Candor and Just Work all the time. Like those two books are the ones I'm referring to people. These are the ones that I am using. But there are things about both those books where I have to step back and say, this piece is not applicable. And here's why. Here's why it's not going to be this part. And I wish that we could step back as a community and say, we need to critically evaluate these things and figure out what works for you and what works for your organization. I am not, this will come as a shock, I am not an extrovert. Okay. So I'm going to take a nap after this, people. Okay. But
I'm right there with you.
So I am not an extrovert, but I can adapt to the situation I'm in to be entertaining, be funny, all those kinds of things, which maybe sometimes I am, but it is that part of it that you need to say what works for this situation. There are lots of times in my work, as an investigator in particular, where I just sit and I listen. I might ask probing questions, but it's that understanding why I'm behaving the way I'm behaving. And we in human resources can't just have a cookie cutter approach to everything. And SHRM teaches that cookie cutter approach. You've got to find what works for you and works for your organization. And we have to be able to step back. And I agree with you, Liliana, that organization in South California is fabulous. So sorry, I'm just catching like glimpses.
I know, it's really hard. I am very shortly going to have somebody running tech on these because I'm doing the tech stuff and trying to talk and do all of it. And it's a challenge. So we're doing our best here, guys. Just a couple questions that have come in. So, hey, Kevin Flanner, good to see you. Thanks for being here. I haven't seen you in a while, so hi, friend. So one of the things that's come up is how do we take this, right? How do we take this momentum and influence the larger SHRM? I think that's the question on everyone's mind. How? And before we went live, we were talking, Kate and I were talking about it feels as though there's this impenetrable force field around the executive team and the board at SHRM that they're just simply deflecting anything. And I don't know the answer to this one. And Kate, I'd love your thoughts and tell us also about your petition and maybe we can get some more, fuel there.
Sure. So first of all, if you go to the SHRM website and you want to talk to the board of directors, there's going to be a generic email that you can use to email the board of directors. Don't email it. Really, don't. You've got a recruiter, either you're a recruiter or you know a recruiter, go find the actual email addresses of the various board members if you want to go talk to them. Because that mysterious inbox, I don't know if it ever gets read by a board member. And so I would say, please go find the real email address for a board member if you want to talk to them. Then I think we need to start having real, hard, deep conversations with the local levels to say, hey, folks, is this what we want to be representing to us? Is this really what we want to be at? And I say that knowing that when I've spoken at local SHRM chapters, like, for example, I just spoke on one on bias. And I was talking about this pay equity thing in the amicus brief, and everyone in the room was shocked. Everyone was shocked. And I'm like, you guys didn't know that? Like, I realize that my pulse is on some of this, and people call me all the time. Like, once I started this petition, I get calls out of the woodwork about people wanting to tell me about SHRM. So there is this time where we need to communicate with our cohort, our colleagues, and say, hey, did you know about these kinds of things? And then what are we going to communicate to our individual advocates that we have on a regional basis? How are we going to communicate with our state boards? And how are we going to ask them to communicate with national when they attend things like volunteer leader events? So I wish we would feel comfortable having these conversations. I hope having this conversation, for one, makes y'all think that it's okay to have those kinds of conversations. Reaching out to people who've been on the front lines of these. I'm happy to take emails whenever you've got one. But we have to be more vocal about it, and we have to really start having those conversations amongst ourselves and those who advocate to national on this topic.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's not a one size fits all, right? We've got to go at it from every angle possible. And I also think there is absolutely a migration. People are moving away because they're recognizing they're not getting the learning, they're not getting the development, they're not getting the resources they really need. When we think about how many things are springing up out there, I think about Enrique Rubio's group and Hacking HR and the, tens of thousands of people. I want to say 40,000 people or something signed up. And this year is going to be even more. And every one of us who sits on one of those panels, we volunteer to do it because we want to give back and we want to help grow and nurture the people who are in our community. And there's lots of these things that are starting to really bubble up. And I've had people approach me, and I'm considering, I've been working in the background of doing a summit around, people for people, because that's what we really need. And we shouldn't have to do that. This organization exists, right? We shouldn't have to go outside the parameters of this organization that claims to be representing us. And when you think about the Wall Street Journal and the Post and all of these large publications, when they want an expert opinion, they go to SHRM for it. Right. And that's so scary to me at this point, because what expert opinion are they actually going to get? Because I'm not at all confident that it's going to be representative of anything that I think or believe.
Right. Well, I agree with you. And I agree with Eric's point here that the only thing that's going to really affect SHRM is losing money. I think he's 100% correct on that. I haven't paid dues in a while. Because I'm upset, and a lot of my friends haven't paid dues in a while. And so SHRM goes, well, you're not a paying member. Why should I have to listen to you? Well, I am in the community. I am out here in this community. I am a part of the group that you claim that you represent. But it's not just going to be the individual donors or the individual contributors. It's going to have to be the Boeings, the Coke Industries, the large organizations that buy huge bulk groups of memberships that are going to say, maybe we shouldn't be a part of this anymore. And so if you're in one of those organizations, having that conversation with the people who make that decision, whether to sponsor, et cetera, is going to be part of that conversation too. But I do think, and I may have a massive ego here on this, but I do think the more conversations we have, the more pressure it puts on SHRM. And so I'm happy to have these conversations with almost anybody, with my schedule allowing, to continue having this discussion.
No, I'm right there with you. And I do this show every Tuesday at noon. For the most part, I sometimes I'm not every Tuesday, but I feel like, I don't have a huge audience, but it's growing. And the more we can bring forward these issues and concerns in the dialogue, and the more folks can be enlightened, because, when you're in the trenches and you're that, HR department of one, you probably don't have time to be out there, thumbing through the magazines and reading the legislation. And you're just like, your head is in the game doing your job, thinking that the dues you're paying are going to benefit you at a point in time and provide you the resources and the voice you need. And unfortunately, that's not happening. So the more we can create these types of conversations and then let them live online so people can access it when they have time, and it's free. So we're not asking them for money to do this. I think the better off we will be. So, you always have an open invitation, Kate, join me here as often as your schedule allows, because I do think we need to get deeper into some of these areas to help folks understand what's really going on. When we did our prep call last week, you shared with me something that I was like, what? And I don't remember, but I remember you saying that the Koch brothers were somehow involved in all of this. So can you share with us a little bit of that? Because I was like, what?
Okay, so remember pre-pandemic, and we were still in, and I hate this phrase, so you can say that I said it, but please note that I hated saying it, the war for talent. And we were stuck, trying to find people. And so SHRM came out with an initiative to give folks second chances. So taking people who had been incarcerated and, getting them into jobs by things like banning the box, by giving them tools to be better interviewers. And that initiative was subsidized by the Koch brothers.
And what do you think's behind that?
I think it's political ambition on Johnny C. Taylor Jr.'s part, because the Koch brothers are very large donors for political things. And so that's my suspicion. You don't get into bed with the Koch brothers just willy-nilly. I think you make a deliberate decision to get involved with them. I mean, it's like, for me, I drive an electric vehicle and my house is 100% on wind. If I was going to represent Exxon, that would be a remarkably shocking thing for me to do. Is this really where we want to be? The aligning with folks who have perpetuated racist policies and argue for them at Congress? Is that where we want to be? I guess that's where we are. So,
yeah. It would be like if Chick-fil-A supported my show, right? And they're very vocal about donating money to causes they believe in, which I support. They have every right to donate their money. The causes they believe in happen to be causes that believe that my marriage doesn't exist, right? I'm not okay with that. So I don't think I would ever have them as a sponsor for the table because it just wouldn't work. I totally understand what you're saying. And we have to make those conscious decisions, right? I actually thought about this the other day. If they came, and not that I expect them to, but if they came to me and said, we want to sponsor your show, and it wouldn't matter how much money they offered me. I don't think I couldn't do it because it just wouldn't make sense to me. It wouldn't be authentic.
Yeah, well, I agree with you 100%. And I did a Disrupt talk on this, and maybe Wendy will be able to find it on the top of her head. But I did a Disrupt talk on this about where, as human resources, we need to find our values and understand our values and stick true to our values. And that may be your own individual values, and whatever floats your boat, I'm okay with. Okay. But if it was, my values are, I am looking for an organization committed to DE&IB initiatives. I'm looking for an organization that is committed to making sure we eliminate the gender wage gap. I am committed to these kinds of values. If I looked at SHRM's behavior, I would say that's not a part for me. And so I ask for HR people to look at their own values and be loyal to who they are rather than this blind loyalty to an organization that just doesn't, the consequences of their behavior show that they don't care about those values. And yes, Mara, now that I know I say your name right, yes, you got to put your money where your values are. I do it in my personal life. I do it in my professional life. And I think we all, if we spent some time and did both the research and had those conversations, I think we might think differently on a lot of different fronts. Yeah,
I would agree. So if folks want to sign the petition, Tracy, can you post the link again real quick? Tracy Hill's been amazing at
yes, she has.
So I'm not even going to attempt to type it in myself because she probably has it on copy and paste on her clipboard. We'll throw that link back out there for everyone. And I encourage you all to please, please, please use the voices you have. Make sure, right? Make sure that if you believe in something, that you talk about it, right? It's that if you see it on the subways in New York, right? If you see something, say something. We all have to adopt that. We have a voice, we have a platform, we have a position. And, my voice might be small, my platform might be tiny, but I'm going to use it. And to me, it's our obligation to each other, right? It's not about what I'm getting out of it. It's what we collectively can do. And that's why organizations like Black Lives Matter formed, right? Because the collective, the larger the voice, the more attention you get. And if we just continue to sit by, what are we doing? And I think it in many ways, it's the very definition of privilege, is that we see all this stuff happening, but it's not really affecting me personally. So I'm not going to say anything. And then when something does affect us, we start to use our voice. I think we need to be using our voices in as many ways as possible, because one day it will affect you.
Right. And we have to do it when it's hard. Like, it's really hard. It's easy to sit back and gather all of those toolkits and use those things as templates. It's really easy. It's the hard work that, even though we're burnt out because we were in a pandemic, we might be having to look at vaccine mandates and all the other shit that's coming down the pike. It is, yes, this is hard, but it is worth it. And it is what we need to be for the people we serve.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's beautiful the way you said that, right? Our sole purpose in the world of HR or the people space is to craft and influence policies, infrastructure, decisions, culture through the lens of the people who work within the organization, right? Everything that happens in a company happens as a result of people. A company is just a legal structure. It's a piece of paper. It's, it's the corporation itself is a legal entity, but an organization is people, and nothing happens without those individuals, whether you're keying in something, you're making a product, you're selling it, whatever your role is. So we can't just simply continue down a path of ignoring the fact that these things are happening to our people. And we have to respond to it accordingly. We can't just sit there and be quiet about it. And I just continue to struggle with how easy it is for them to not do anything. Yeah. I'm trying to read the comments again. Hold on.
They're going so great.
I know. Yes.
Thank you all for being here.
Yes. So Eric says, until all of us are free, none of us are free. It's so true. It's so true. And the very first quote I ever posted way back when, my first Facebook page banner was a quote, and I have it on my wall. It's, "If we have no peace, it's because we have forgotten that we belong to each other." And it's a quote from Mother Teresa. And I just believe that is so powerful. And I think that SHRM has forgotten that we belong to each other, and that they have an opportunity to speak on behalf of everyone impacted, and they're simply squandering this opportunity for whatever personal gains they have, and it's just incredibly disappointing. Yeah. Okay, we can do hard things. Yes, surely we can. All right. So we have just a few more minutes. Oh goodness, there's a lot more comments here. So if you guys, does anybody have any questions for Kate while we have her here? I would love to be able to, throw your questions up here. I know earlier someone said, are there other resources available to folks? I would say there's always another resource out there. As we mentioned, Hacking HR from Enrique Rubio. There's been several others brought up in HR4HR.org is another great one. Redefining HR, that's Lars Schmidt's one. Those are all great places to look. Something has happened several times. They're like, "Hey, why don't you just start your own HR organization?" And I'm like, no. Yeah, I am happy to help, but I am not starting my own. So, but there are other resources out there. All of the folks who've been on here are people that you should connect to, because they share really good stuff. They do. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay, I'm frozen. Can you see me? Or do I look frozen? I can't see you move. Okay, well, for some reason, my screen is frozen, and it's such a lovely view. But anyway. You look great, Barbie. You look great. As long as you can hear me, that's what matters. So I love this quote, right? Is, first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win. And, so we're in the ignore stage, I think. I'm not sure. But hopefully eventually we'll come together and we'll be able to make some meaningful changes that we all need. So I think, SHRM's biggest competitors are its local chapters. Absolutely. Guys, thank you all for being here. It's been a phenomenal session. You can count on me inviting Tracy, Kate back, and sure, Tracy, all the Tracys can come back too.
Yes. Yes.
But thank you so much. Your knowledge just is so impactful to all of us, and truly thank you for fighting the fight, for starting the petition. If you haven't signed it and you feel compelled to do so, please click the link, sign the petition. The more of us who are using our voices, the better off our outcomes will be. They can only ignore us for so long because, as we've said, their funding is going to start to diminish and they're going to become irrelevant. It's already happening, but it will start happening on a much greater scale. I think sooner than later, frankly. I think that COVID has empowered people in ways that we never thought would happen. And we are now seeing that in a lot of different aspects of our lives. And this is just one more of them. So thank you, guys. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I'm sorry I'm still frozen on the screen. I don't know what's going on. But I wish you all a wonderful week. And I will see you next week, Tuesday at noon. And then I will put this up on YouTube as soon as I'm able to download it and get it up there. So kisses to everyone. Thank you all. And we'll see you next week. Thank you, Kate.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.